The line outside the America's Got Talent auditions wrapped around the building before sunrise. Performers from every corner of the country stood clutching instruments, costumes, and dreams that had survived years of rejection. Among them was a man no one paid attention to. His jacket was faded, his shoes scuffed thin at the soles, and his backpack looked like it had traveled more miles than most people ever would. His name was Daniel Reyes, and until that morning, his stage had been sidewalks, subway platforms, and street corners where people rarely looked him in the eye. Daniel had slept on buses, under bridges, and sometimes in doorways when the night grew too cold. Music was never a career plan for him. It was survival. When his father died unexpectedly, Daniel was 16. His mother worked 2 jobs, then 3, until exhaustion turned into illness. Medical bills stacked higher than hope, and eventually the house they lived in was gone. Daniel dropped out of school, not because he didn't care, but because life didn't give him a choice. The guitar he carried was a second-hand instrument given to him by a street musician who noticed him tapping rhythms on a trash can, turning silence into sound. Years later, that same guitar rested inside the backpack now pressed against Daniel's chest as he stepped forward when his number was called. He didn't tell anyone his story. He didn't rehearse a speech. He didn't practice smiling for the cameras. He simply walked onto the stage as he was, knowing that for the first time, people would have to listen or turn away completely. The lights hit him harder than he expected. He squinted, seeing only shapes where the judges sat. Simon Cowell leaned forward slightly, curious but guarded. Heidi Klum smiled kindly. Howie Mandel tilted his head, trying to read the man standing before them. Sofia Vergara waited, eyebrows raised, ready to be surprised or disappointed. Terry Crews announced his name, and the crowd applauded politely, the kind of applause that said good luck, not belief. Simon asked the first question. What do you do for a living? Daniel paused. He could lie. He could say musician, singer, artist. Instead, he told the truth. I play music on the street. There was a murmur in the audience. Not mocking, but uncertain. Simon nodded slowly. And why are you here today? Daniel swallowed. Because I've played for people who never stop walking. I want to play for people who will listen. That answer hung in the air longer than expected. Simon raised an eyebrow. What will you be performing? Daniel opened his backpack and took out the guitar. An old acoustic, scratched and faded, its wood darkened by time and weather. He adjusted the strap with steady hands that didn't shake, even though his heart was pounding so loudly he thought the microphones might pick it up. He began to play. At first, it was simple. A soft progression, familiar but altered just enough to feel personal. A melody shaped by long nights and empty streets. Then he started to sing. His voice wasn't polished. It wasn't trained in conservatories or perfected in studios. It was raw, textured, carrying the sound of someone who had sung to be heard over traffic, over rain, over loneliness. The lyrics told a story without ever saying his name. A story of loss, of sleeping with one eye open, of believing that even broken people could still create something beautiful. Halfway through the first verse, the room changed. The whispers stopped. Phones lowered. People leaned forward in their seats. The judges exchanged glances, the kind that said something unexpected was happening. Simon's expression softened, his usual skepticism replaced by focus. Heidi's eyes glistened. Howie's mouth hung slightly open. Daniel closed his eyes as he reached the chorus. His voice rose, not in volume, but in emotion. The words spilled out like confessions he had never said aloud. He sang about being invisible and choosing to stand anyway. About being knocked down and singing louder. About finding light even when you live in shadows. Then, something extraordinary happened. One person stood up. A woman in the back row rose to her feet, hands pressed together. Then another person stood. Then another. Like a wave rolling forward, row by row, the audience began to rise. By the time Daniel reached the final chorus, every single person in the theater was standing. Daniel didn't see it. His eyes were still closed. When he finished the last note, silence fell for a single, breathless second. Then the room exploded. The applause was thunderous. People screamed. Some cried openly. The standing ovation refused to end. Daniel opened his eyes and froze. His breath caught as he saw thousands of people on their feet, clapping for him, for the same man who had been ignored on sidewalks just weeks before. He stepped back, overwhelmed, pressing a hand to his chest. Simon was the first to speak, and his voice was quieter than usual. That was honest. You weren't trying to impress us. You were telling the truth. And that's very rare. Heidi leaned forward. I felt like you were singing for every person who has ever felt unseen. Howie nodded. You didn't just perform. You connected. Sophia smiled warmly. This is why this show exists. Daniel tried to respond, but emotion closed his throat. He managed a quiet thank you. Then Simon said something that changed everything. I want to know something. If this doesn't work out, what happens next for you? Daniel hesitated, then answered honestly. I go back to the street. But tonight, at least I got to sing where people listened. The audience reacted instantly. Booing the idea, clapping harder, refusing to accept that ending. Simon stood up. That alone shocked the room. He looked out at the crowd, then back at Daniel. You shouldn't go back to the street. Not after this. He reached forward and hit the golden buzzer. Gold confetti rained down as the theater erupted. Daniel dropped to his knees, hands shaking, tears streaming freely down his face. Terry Crews ran onto the stage and lifted him into a hug as the music swelled and the audience roared. But the twists didn't end there. Backstage, producers learned more about Daniel's story. His mother, who hadn't been able to attend because she was working a night shift, was watching from a break room on a tiny phone screen. When she saw her son covered in gold, she collapsed into a chair, crying so hard her coworkers gathered around her in silence. Within hours, clips of Daniel's performance went viral. Millions of views. Messages poured in from people who said his song felt like their own story. Former teachers reached out. Old friends. Strangers offering help, opportunities, support. In the weeks that followed, Daniel returned to the stage for live shows, each performance stronger than the last. But fame didn't change him. He still carried the same guitar. He still thanked the crew. He still stopped to talk to other performers waiting nervously in line, telling them they mattered. The final twist came during the finale. Before Daniel performed, the screen behind him lit up with images. Street corners. Subways. Rain-soaked sidewalks. And then, his mother appeared, standing backstage. She stepped onto the stage as the crowd erupted again. Daniel broke down, hugging her as she whispered how proud she was. How she never stopped believing. Daniel sang one last time that night, his voice steadier, fuller, but still honest. When he finished, the audience rose again, as one. Not because he was perfect. But because he was real. End. Engagement.